this is it. This is the moment when my life changed. He tried to kill me. I looked up, and that's the last thing I remember from that night. That's me looking in my uniform with my beret and no stripes and looking all bright and cheerful and anticipating my next adventure in life. That's me 2 years later. When I got to Korea, things started out very well. I got my promotions on time. I got excellent performance evaluations. And then things changed drastically. My squadron commander basically pressured me into dating someone from wing headquarters. And that was for sex. And it wasn't violent at that point. I coped. There was no place to go at that time. There were no rape. There was no reporting. I did go have a chance to get some legal advice, and I was told that if I filed any kind of report, I would be, and these are the exact words, lucky if nothing happened to me, that it would have an adverse effect on me, that I could be court-martialed for making false statements. And because I was a first-term enlisted person, and I would have been making fairly serious charges against 2 career officers with, solid careers and so on, that their word would automatically carry, and I would actually wind up with a federal felony conviction out of it. So, I coped. I got on with things. I was not doing as well. My performance evaluations weren't so good. I kept hearing that I had a bad attitude. There was a lot of stuff that nobody could pin down, and I couldn't tell anybody why I was acting the way I was, just very resentful. Then one night I was on my way to the women's barracks, which was up a long, isolated hill. And there wasn't much of anything around. There were some buildings across the road, but they were set back a ways. The senior officer who'd been involved, the one that I was quote unquote dating, got me in his car and took me off base. He told me on the way out that he had been passed over for promotion. And I didn't realize the significance of that. He had not been violent before, and I wasn't expecting anything. I wasn't happy about it, but I wasn't expecting to be like beat up or anything like that. And then what happened was he began to drive his car into a bus and commit suicide and take me with him. The last thing I saw was the side of the bus. I think I was thrown back across the car. There was a ridge on the side of my head for several years after that, which means I had a bump somewhere along the line. That's the skull can form a calcification after some kind of injury, but I don't remember. Whether the memory went away just because of the physical injury hitting my head, and also because of the trauma. I don't remember going anything after that. I don't remember getting back to base. We would have had to go through a security checkpoint, and apparently nobody saw anything to report, or if they did, they were intimidated by his rank and position. So I guess, I don't know, I went back to my barracks, and I must have gotten up the next day because there wasn't any disciplinary action for failing to report for duty ever. So I carried on after that, and things were just not the same. A lot of people had thought that I was going to be career military, and based on my previous successful career, that probably was a good possibility. And then I got out, I went home, and I did help my mother. And I just led a very different life than what I had led before I enlisted. It took 14 years for what happened that night to catch up with me. 14 years. I had gotten out of the service. I helped my mother. I had gone to college. I even managed to graduate after helping her when she had a stroke. So, I'm not weak or lazy. I worked really, really hard, and I built a life again. And I was starting to be successful in a career. There was an incident at work. There was a potentially serious problem with a customer, and I was called into the manager's office. I felt that I had not done anything wrong. I felt that I had handled the situation actually as well as anybody could. But I was called into the manager's office and asked to sit down. And then he brought his assistant manager in. So I wound up, that office was set up in a very strange way. He had his desk, instead of being under the window facing away from the door, he brought it, turned it around so it was facing towards the door. And there was just a very narrow space between the front of the desk and the wall. And there were two chairs there, and I sat on the one, and then the assistant manager sat in the other chair. So I was cornered. I was literally cornered. There was a desk in front of me. There was an assistant manager between me and the door. And as the discussion went on, the manager started getting, he was on the other side of the desk facing me. He started getting more and more agitated. He was turning red in the face. I could see muscles like in his, rippling, and I really thought that he was going to come across the desk at me. And being in that situation in kind of the narrow seated area with no way out, that and the threat in front of me coming at me was enough like what had happened 14 years earlier that brought on the PTSD. At the time, that condition wasn't recognized, but it, looking back, and I've talked to people about it, and that's when it started. Certainly after that, I was never able to hold a job for any length of time. Doing really well, and in the early 1990s, before this happened, I was taking home like $900 a week. I was doing really well. I was on track to meet any kind of material goals that I had for myself, and I liked my career. I was in sales, and I hadn't had any particular aptitude for it, but I worked really hard at it. And I discovered that I really did like it. I liked going out and seeing all the different people. And I was working really hard, but I was really happy until this incident came back. And after that, with it just brought back so much. And then I had gotten past what had happened, and then it just all came back. I don't remember even that particular day in the manager's office. I don't remember leaving, and that was a pretty notable event because I've been doing really well with that company, and for things to suddenly turn around and go sour like that so badly. I don't remember anything after seeing this guy's face all red and the muscles just rippling under his skin. And I don't remember leaving that office. I don't remember going home. I just know that after that, I did not stay with that company very long, and I started hopping around from job to job, and I just couldn't hold it together. I didn't get along with people. I didn't want anybody to know anything about me personally, so I didn't have the social aspects of being able to hold a job, which is very important. I wound up temping, which, I'd be 2 days here and 2 weeks there. And it just got to be just more and more difficulties piled on top of difficulties.
In the shadows of Boston City Hall, you'll find some of the most vulnerable men and women who served our country seeking shelter at the New England Center for Homeless Veterans, where they promised them a safe, warm place to stay.
When I was there, it was called New England Shelter for Homeless Veterans. They did have what's called an SRO area, which is single room occupancy. They didn't let any women into that. It's known informally among veterans in that area as Court Street. It's at 17 Court Street, which is in the financial district of Boston. And the name change, it's also backs onto City Hall. The name change is really interesting to me because I had actually seen, when I was there in 2008, and it was still the New England Shelter for Homeless Veterans, I had actually seen groups of tourists stop and point at the name and have some very emotional reactions to the notion that this great nation actually has to have, any city actually has to have a shelter just for veterans. So I think that's why they changed the name. They make it sound more comprehensive.
5 Investigates took a look at city records from the past 2.5 years. There are hundreds of calls to Boston police for reports including illegal drugs, assaults, and illegal firearms. More than 400 emergency medical calls last year.
That was pretty much what was going on when I was there. I actually called the police myself one time on another woman who was threatening me. And staff got very angry at me for that, but they wouldn't do anything themselves. And I didn't know what else to do. So the police came in, and then I guess everybody realized that, I was serious about I was not going to put up with this. So things got a little more under control, but they had this tiny little room for the women. Being in a shelter, and especially that shelter, is a very different experience for a woman than it often is for the men.
We also discovered 32 men who live or work at the center are registered sex offenders, most of them level 3s who are considered the most likely to reoffend.
Instead of taking any special measures with the sex offenders, they restricted the women. And before I moved up to the women's area, the long-term women's area, when I first came in, I had to spend a week in what they call on the cots while they figure out that you don't have TB or anything horribly infectious. And while I was there, I was not allowed to go to the bathroom by myself. I had to go out and get one of the men to walk me back to the bathroom and stand outside the toilet while I did my business, and then walk me back down the hall. And this is the kind of thing you put up with, because otherwise, you know, you're going to be out, and it's way more dangerous for women than men. But that is the kind of thing that was going on. But the sex offenders, they're walking around free as a bird, and they're making all these restrictions on women and saying, oh, you can't go here, you can't go there, you can't walk down the hall by yourself, you can't go to the bathroom by yourself. And that's just, the kind of thing that makes it a very different experience for women to be in a shelter.
The band played at the center's signature $275 a plate gala. According to financial records, it's just part of the millions in donations and grants pouring in each year.
The food, a lot of the food it's secondhand. I've gotten rotten food. This shelter, the New England shelter, as it was called then, Court Street, as I knew it, got massive amounts of pasta after that they served to the Boston Marathon, the night before the Boston Marathon, so the guys can, well, the runners can do their carb load, so they have all this pasta salad. Well, then they donated. Sounds very, you know, it's a very nice gesture, and it's well meant. They probably had no clue that this stuff was going to be served for a week to come, by which time the pasta's turning brown, the spinach leaves you can see through them. They've deteriorated so much, and they just keep serving it. They got meatloaf sandwiches from some other place, and I was talking with some friends about it, and I said, you know, they asked me if I'd had the meatloaf sandwich. I said, no, I have this personal policy that I don't eat meatloaf unless I made it myself. And he said, well, that's good, because he had got one of these meatloaf sandwiches and he opened it up and it was green. It was rotten and green. I got a green orange someplace, and it wasn't a healthy green. It was a moldy, it was mold all over. And I gave it back, and the person said, oh, well, we'll get you another one. And I'm like, okay. But I'm thinking to myself, but you handed it out to me in the first place. You didn't care enough. You know, you didn't see like a fully fledged human being on the other side of the glass. You thought it was okay to give me this green, covered in mold piece of fruit. It didn't matter. Now when I say something, I'm going to get like a healthy piece of fruit. But that's you know, that's like really one, it's just coming to me right now, that's like one really capsule moment of being a homeless person and the way you're treated. That I can't imagine anybody in any other, you know, like a school cafeteria or anything like that, handing another person a piece of fruit in that state. These were not little speckles or anything like that. This was solid all over, all the way around, green with mold. That was probably actually almost the only time that I ever in any way reproved somebody in a shelter, because if you do, pretty much you're going to get put out normally. That person was there as just for the day. They didn't really have any power over me. They couldn't throw me out. But usually you don't have any kind of conversation or go-backs with shelter personnel as a resident, as an occupant, because if there's any resolution, pretty much it's going to come down to you getting thrown out. And I've seen people thrown out. I got put out of one place in a snowstorm, so I can tell you it happens. They don't care. When you've been homeless, you've been detached from just about any kind of normalcy in your life. When you apply for housing, you're not going to have any references, and you're not really going to want to refer landlords to shelter workers to say, well, you know, this person didn't get into, you know, any fights, and that's the best we can say. So you're pretty much going to wind up in some form of subsidized housing. The lucky ones might get a Section 8 voucher. They might get a room somewhere, what's called an SRO, single room occupancy. I wound up in public housing in Quincy, Massachusetts. It was allegedly a one-bedroom. There was no dining room. The whole thing was about 20 feet by 20 feet. Bedroom, there was a living room, tiny, tiny kitchen. The countertop was about the length of my arm. The stove was not any normal stove I've ever seen in my life. It was tiny. You couldn't roast a turkey in it. And there were a lot of fights going on. There was somebody next door that his girlfriend would come over, and they would get into a lot of fights. But they always sort of cleaned up their act if anybody called the police, because they looked right out on the entrance so they could see the police coming. And they pretty much figured it was for them. So by the time the police got upstairs, oh no, everything's fine. So that's going on. There were other fights. It was pretty dismal. That's what you wind up with. When I moved in, I had an air mattress. That was it, an air mattress. And I was in my 50s. I had just gotten this little place, and that was as close to committing suicide as I have ever been, because it was like my whole life as an adult had been wiped out. And when I graduated high school and I got a job, I had a small apartment, an efficiency apartment, but it was in a nicer building, and I didn't have to, you know, listen to people fighting, and I had furniture, and, you know, I enjoyed it. It was pleasant. I felt safe. None of that I had in the public housing in Quincy. And it was like I've come from age 18 to, 40 years, and I've actually gone backwards. That was really tough to deal with. Coming out here to Michigan has really, really been good. And one thing that I haven't told anybody before is that I came out here and I bought a house that I had never actually laid eyes on or set foot on before in my life. I saw my house that I had bought several weeks previously by wiring the funds out to Michigan for this place I'd never seen before. I can do some gardening, and I have my lilac hedge that one of these years is going to be gorgeous, and I'm finally getting settled.
Yeah, but one of the fun things, looking back, it wasn't fun at the time, was about a week after you moved in, you called and you said, you know, this big vine in the back of the yard, I think it's poison ivy.
Oh, yeah.
And it was.
Yeah.
And it was this huge, it was just flourishing. It was gorgeous. If it hadn't been poison ivy, you would have welcomed having this gorgeous vine back there.
Yeah.
And it was starting to produce berries. So she had no car, so I went to the thrift shop and got us some things to wear while we did battle. And the only, what I think of how we were dressed to go out and fight the poison ivy, I think of Through the Looking Glass when Tweedledum and Tweedledee get all done up and they have like pots and pans on their heads and stuff. It was warm, it was July.
Yeah.
We had 2 shirts, 2 pairs of pants,
Yeah.
covers on our shoes. We had shower caps on and safety glasses because we're both very allergic.
Just peel it all off, stuff it in a bag,
Yeah.
throw it away. Yeah.
Yeah, and then spray what was left.
Yeah.
And there was a lot left because it was a very healthy vine and it was twisted in the fence and whatever, and partly in the neighbors' yards. And it took I think an additional 2 sprayings
yeah.
after that to kill the rest of it. But that was, yeah, you know, I think of it, that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
And we did not get poison ivy.
Yes. Our little hazmat, makeshift hazmat suits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then this house was much more what you really wanted. So.
Bigger yard, more open.
But you wanted to find some pictures of Mother, and I'm not much of a picture taker, but Tosh took a lot of pictures and he organized them. So we have him to thank for that. He made an album for each year back in the 80s and into the early 90s.
Oh my goodness.
And I didn't find as many as I would have liked, but that was one that I thought you would like to see.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And and I'm not sure that you ever saw this one ever at all. This
I
was
did
from
not.
one time when Mother came out to Michigan, and she visited us, and we took her to Frankenmuth, home of the world's largest Christmas store, and they have a covered bridge, and you actually have seen that bridge now that you came to Michigan. It goes to a restaurant, a German restaurant, and that was kind of cool because we did start out in Germany. You and I
Yes.
both started in Germany because, of course,
Daddy was
She
in
and-
the Army, and those were the days when women could get out of their military service because they got married,
which she did.
which she did. Yeah, she had been a nurse. Well, she was a nurse. She served during World War II. And then she got married and got out. Yeah, you could just, hi, I'm getting married. Bye. I don't think they do that anymore.
I don't believe so. I didn't find any pictures of Daddy other than the old one that was before you were even born. Because I don't have the old family albums. I don't know where they are. But so I don't have any pictures of him that are anywhere near, our adulthood.
There's they've got to be somewhere in my storage in some of those, because I had kept them in a trunk, and apparently I thought I should pack them better, because when I opened up the trunk it was empty. So they've got to be, I mean, I certainly wouldn't have thrown them away. They've got to be there, and I'll just have to keep digging through the stuff in storage to find them. The hearing with the VA in, it must have been 2012?
It must have been.
That was the last hearing that I went to. There were some of them before that I refer to as interrogations, that I felt like I was treated like a criminal. That one, I think the guy was really, really unprofessional. He had, there was a stack of records, and no doubt about it. And for him to like slap it and say, "This is your file," like, I did this, it's my fault. And the thought that went through my mind is, you know, whether or not he's actually trying to provoke me and get me to say something, you know, cuss him out, or even just argue with him so that he can say, "Oh, you know, I can't work with you, you have to go away." And that's speculation, but, you know, after some of the dealings and after everything I went through, and I don't know if I ever did tell you how much it meant to me for you to go with me that day. Not to mention the fact that there was a sniper at work on the route, and I wouldn't have known how to drive there. So that was a double.
Well, of course you didn't have a car yet.
Yes.
But yes, there was a sniper taking pot shots at people along I-96 at that time, and I was hoping you didn't know about that because you were nervous enough about going to the hearing in the first place. So I didn't mention it. I was a little nervous. I thought about taking other routes, but I didn't want to have to explain why we were going some weird way. And the sniper did not shoot anybody that day. But yeah, we had to go to downtown Detroit, and I had no idea what to expect. I'd never been at one of these before. And I thought that perhaps that slap was an attempted intimidation. But I was allowed to be in the room only on the condition that I had to be absolutely silent. So I remained silent, but I did think that if he was trying to intimidate you, he picked the wrong time, because that was one hearing where your lawyer was present.
Yeah.
And so you had reinforcements that day, which had not been there for your other hearings. So
I still have that in snapshots, because I think the hearing itself was so distressful, and I was so wound up. So I get little bits, like being in this weird unpaved parking lot that was almost more like a junkyard.
Welcome to downtown Detroit.
Yeah, going into the federal building. I don't remember going through. I know we had to go through security. You do it at any federal building now. I don't remember that.
It was a very long line. We waited a long time to get in.
I don't remember that. I think at that point I was starting to feel a little bit sick to my stomach, actually. Mm-hmm. I remember meeting my attorney, who I never met face to face. We just communicated by email and phone before. And I remember going in and "This is your file." And the rest of it's kind of a blur. I don't remember too much more until we got out and we were headed away from that, and we started talking again. But the rest of it, I mean,
Well, your attorney did most of the questioning in that particular interview. He asked you questions that you could respond to, so that there was a narrative. He basically developed a narrative.
Yeah.
And I sat there silently and just watched.
He said something at one point. He said, well, at two different points, and I put them together, and he said, well, this office and that office have pretty good approval rates for non-combat PTSD. And I thought, well, that's strange. That hasn't been my experience with either of those offices, because I've been at both of them. And then sometime later, he said, when we were talking about him coming to my hearing, and he said, oh yeah, I go to a lot of hearings there and the other place. And I'm going, that's why they have the good approval rates. Seriously. I don't think they would otherwise. Mm-hmm. Some of those hearings, oh my gosh. I mean, if that DRO acted that way with an attorney and another non-veteran, a real person in the room, I don't know what he would have been like if I'd have gone in there by myself. I really don't. That was the other thing that kind of went through my mind. He's going to act that way in front of these people. And I've had him tell me to shut up. That was when I was trying to talk to somebody about what they call a buddy letter that a friend of mine had written about the changes in my behavior from when I went in and when I came out. And they're supposed to consider that is valid evidence. Mm-hmm. And he's saying, you don't have anything that connects any of this to your service. And I started to say, well, I have a buddy letter. And he's like, shut up. Mm-hmm. And that's how some of these went. I had another interview in Boston, and somebody did go with me to that one. And she was my therapist at the time, outside therapist. That was one of the ones that went like, okay, they acted. I don't remember who I saw now, because I get so wound up. I've come out of at least one of them that, I was just in a daze. There was one in Baltimore that was in this tiny little office, and it was two people, and one of them sat on my left, and one of them stood on my right, blocking the doorway, and then they started firing questions at me. And shortly after that, Court TV had just started to come on, and they were showing real stuff, not reenactments, but real stuff. And I just happened to surf on to a video of a real, honest-to-goodness police interrogation of a murder suspect. And I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at the physical setup and the way they're talking to, and I'm like, that's what they did to me. That's exactly what they did to me. Every time I have another hearing or interview, I would they were horrible. They do make you worse. Just in case you're starting to calm down, it's like you're gonna rake it all over. But yeah, that was really important to have your support that day. So, thank you.
I'm glad I could do it. I wish I could have done more when you were still out in Boston and I was here in Michigan, hundreds of miles away.
Yeah. Well, that wasn't really feasible. And I did manage to stick up for myself. And
you had to stick up very persistently for yourself.
Yeah.
For a number of years.
When I first moved to Lansing, I didn't know anybody except my sister. I didn't have a car. I had been out once years ago, and I'm not sure that I was even in Lansing. I was probably over in East Lansing, so I didn't know my way around. I didn't know anybody. I had a lot of time waiting for contractors, waiting for appliances to be delivered, furniture. So what do you do when you have to sit around? These days you go online and fiddle around. At that time, Yahoo News allowed comments on almost all the stories that they carried, and they carried the regular column for Dear Abby. And I kind of wandered into what we call, and I count myself part of it now, Abbyland on Yahoo. And it's a group of people, many of them had been on years before I started, and it is very much a community. People do get to know each other, and that's an important point. There's one person who runs a monthly virtual birthday party, and she could come on and say happy birthday and give a list of people who participate in Abbyland, and then set out all the virtual treats and cake and cookies and, you know, just everything good to eat in this virtual Abbyland. There was a lot more freedom to say what was on your mind, and that was an important aspect to me when I had been homeless. Things are not discussed with shelter workers. You need a roof over your head, especially in a harsh climate where it can get really cold like Massachusetts. And shelter workers can basically put a person out like at the snap of their fingers. So things are not discussed. If there's any kind of disagreement, you just you just have to put up with whatever it is. You lose that habit of engaging in adult discourse back and forth, working things out. You can't do that. You really, truly cannot do that. You just have to put up with whatever, however silly it might be. You just have to put up with it basically for survival. And once I got out of that, and I found this place where I could go on and pretty much say whatever was on my mind, and there are some controversial topics that come up in Dear Abby, and I would just sort of snap out whatever thought came into my mind. And I had lost any habit of thinking about, you know, how to put it, how to say things more diplomatically, how to be more considerate even of other people. I was just so happy to be able to say whatever I wanted. I was pretty abrasive, and there were some people who would have been just as happy if I had stopped visiting. I began to realize that there was one person who was really nice. She's the lady who does the birthday virtual parties. She's a super nice person. And I had posted something that apparently really offended her, and she's a very forgiving person. And that really made me look at what I was posting and how I was saying things. And I was being obnoxious for the sake of being obnoxious, pretty much, just because I could, and just to get past this, you know, sucking everything up and just putting up with everything. So it became very important to me. It was this online community. I have never met any of these people face to face. A lot of people actually think I'm a man because I do tend to be kind of short-spoken, so you don't know too much about people. But it pushed me to be more civilized in how I address other people, to pick that up again, to kind of restore that part of how I functioned. And that's been very important. I mean, not just in the online community, but that's been helpful to me in all kinds of other ways. And if I'm not perfect with this, but if I have some kind of dispute, I had something from a financial institution that was printed out with some information like right above my name and address. And instead of going off and just, storming out there and, demanding to know what this is and all that, I went in and I was very, I handled it in a very calm, mature, responsible kind of way, which I had been able to do way back when, before the PTSD kicked in. And so it kind of, I've been getting back some of that normalcy in how I communicate. And it's really been very important to me. And it's just a mostly wonderful group of people. I don't think there's everybody on there that necessarily loves everybody else, but it is a community and it really has helped me. And I do thank everybody who's involved with it. I just bring clothes. This is it. This is stuff I brought back from Baltimore that went in storage in 2004, 2003, and 2004. That's a long time to leave stuff in storage. And it was, I never dreamed it was going to be that long. I just knew that I was going to be back for it in a year and get my life back on track. And once you get on the homeless train, it's really, really hard to get off, and it just stretches on and on and on. I don't know what's in here. There's a whole, I know very roughly there's a whole wardrobe full of clothing in there because I had to pack that up and try to hang on. I don't know what condition any of those clothes are in. Some of them aren't going to be good. Some of them might still be usable. And it's craziness. Ham? No, I don't think so. This looks like packing supplies that I didn't use to pack anything. I packed packing supplies. It's packing peanuts. All the way down to the bottom. I packed packing supplies. That's like the state of mind I was in. I was so frantic because I had to get out. I had to try to hang on to, what I did have and get it into storage. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I packed a box of packing supplies. Ooh. Happy hour. And basically I used a lot of clothes and bed linen. This is so messed up. I used a lot of clothes and bed linens instead of packing materials because I didn't want to spend the money. I didn't have the money to spend. So there's a sheet that looks like it'll be usable. I'm going to put that to the side. Have to see how it holds up after it's been washed. What is this? Oh, wow. That's a nice little embroidery. I definitely want that up in my bedroom now. Oh, I have it upside down. Okay. Yeah, that'll be nice in my bedroom now. It's a hodgepodge. Everything is just, it was crazy. I was half crazy. Oh my goodness. This is a teapot. I came home one day and a friend, she had the key to the apartment, and she had brought me a tea kettle. A whoop-de-doo tea kettle. It's a whistling tea kettle, and it's like raging purple and shiny, and that's going to look really nice in my kitchen now because my kitchen is like almost all solid colors, different colors. So that's going to be really great in my kitchen. That's nice. And yeah, I miss her. I knew her since I was like 10 years old. And that's the kind of personal loss that you have. You can't, I don't know where she is. I Googled their address and her husband, and they're not there anymore. And I don't know where they would have gone. I Googled like the whole state, and I don't know where else they would have gone. Another unlabeled box. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I wore this to a party. I got to be friends with someone at work, and in getting to be friends with her, I got to be friends with this whole extended family, and had holidays, go to somebody's house every holiday, and we just had a great time. And I miss her. She's somebody else that I can't find now. I hope what happened, her mother had said something about she had got a job as a paid companion and was traveling with somebody. So again, maybe if I'd been around when that happened, I would have been able to get some kind of contact information to keep up with her. But at this point in time, that's gone. I mean, there are so many connections that you just can't remake. So I'll put that aside. I'll take that back tonight. And the rest of this, I don't know, it gets to be kind of distressing to see stuff popping up. I mean, even silly stuff, like in here is a shower curtain. I love this shower curtain. I don't know if it's even usable anymore. It was just so nice and cheery. What was that? It was just nice and cheery. But I have a shower curtain now, and I don't know what to do with this. And that was, I know where I got this for, and I painted the bathroom pink, this color pink, and it was like super, super girly, and I just really enjoyed it. Now, what do I do with an extra shower curtain? I don't know. I really enjoy feeding the cats. They're all shelter kitties and they appreciate a good home. They get very well fed. They get canned food. They get crunchy treats. They get broth that's made for cats. They're pretty spoiled, but I feel like they deserve it. This is RP, short for Robert Plant, after the rock star. Because of his piercing vocals, you can hear him on another floor. You would not believe the sound that comes out of this little scrap of cat. I particularly love to watch him eat because he had very bad dental problems when I got him. I think he wants to go. And they've been fixed. And he was really, really sick when I adopted him. He needed to have some teeth pulled. He just needed a lot of dental and medical veterinary care. And he's a good little example to me. He's happy and healthy now. He eats, he plays, and he doesn't waste any of the present going back over, what happened to him, before that was wrong and bad, and that he was neglected and in a lot of pain. So he kind of reminds me, I don't want to walk away from some of the things that I had to go through, but I don't want to ruin my present time either. So he's a good little reminder to kind of let some of that go, to try to talk to people, try to do some writing about it, and try to bring some influence on some of these things, but not to let it take over my life, and to just take some time and enjoy what I have now. I'm Cecilia Erickson. This is about finding my way home, and I am now home. I've been here since 2013, and they're going to take me out of this place feet first. I might be kicking and screaming. I might be really, really quiet, but I will be feet first. I am not budging. This is my home, and I'm staying here. And I have my yard, and I have my wildlife that is sometimes annoying when they dig up my yard and my lawn, and the raccoons are trying to teach their babies how to dig for grubs, and my lawn looks like a piece of cloth that moths have gone to work on, but they're still fun. And I have my red squirrels and chipmunks, and I have my non-wildlife inside. I have my 3 cats that are funny and make me happy, and I fuss over them. And I'm home now. It was a struggle, but I'm home.